Hello. In this video, we're going to go over the buildings of Pirate Island. Now, I've already gone over this building, and I went over that buildings in the first two videos for Pirate Island. So now we're going to go over all the other buildings, right? Starting with this building right here. Now, really, the building has a downstairs and an upstairs, right? This is the downstairs, and then there's that little opening into the upstairs. But as for the downstairs, there aren't that many hiding spots that you'll typically see in the downstairs, right? What I would just sort of know is that there should only be a total of 2 cakes. So if you ever see 3 cakes, for instance, like this, then that would be fake. So there's 2 cakes in 1 flower pot. So if you see 2 flower pots, then that would be fake. So for instance, like that. That's basically it, right? What's a little more common is to see a flower pot on top of these leaves, like for instance over here. Now, as for this little opening right here, it's sort of like an attic, right? You have some cobwebs, and sometimes you'll find hiders hiding inside of the cobwebs, for instance, like this, right? They become solid there, but they don't become solid if they hide inside of this cobweb, of course. So something like that. As for the actual blocks, which is a little less common, yeah, if you ever see 3 furnaces in a row, it's fake. If you ever see 2 anvils in a row, like this, or like this, then it's fake, right? Or like this. That's basically it, right? Many times it's chickens hiding in this room, obviously because of the way that the game has progressed, right? You don't usually see many random players playing anymore. This is the top of the building, pretty generic, right? It has fence gates to go from one side to the other, to root from one side to the other, right? I love that word, root, right? To root from one side to the other. Now, you can actually get on top of 2 of these trees. You can get on top of that tree and that tree. But I'm not going to attempt it because I don't want to embarrass myself. Right? I like that. That was good. I'm just joking. But basically, you can get on top of that tree and that tree. So you should be familiar. Hiders can hide on top of those trees from this house. That's basically it for this building. Now we're going to head over to this building right here. Turns out there's this hole right next to the building where hiders can hide as a flower pot. So hider right there could be fake. The building basically has 3 stories, right? First story, second story, and an attic. As for the downstairs, right, or the first story, I'll call it that, the most common spot in this room is to find a melon or flower pot hiding in this hole. That's typically what you see. If you ever see 4 melons on the top of the stack, that's fake. You see... Alright, I like that. Alright, melon on the left side of the stack like that, it's fake. That's basically it. I'm not going to overthink it, right? I like that. That was good. As for this side of the building, you just have a lot of blocks in a row. But this is like the only spot on this side of the wall that doesn't have a block on it, right? This is the only side on the wall that doesn't have a block. So if you see a complete line of blocks, then this would be a fake block. You also see a block on top of any one of these, right? For instance, a block on top of any one of these like this, that would be fake. And also at this corner of the building, you shouldn't see a bookshelf at this corner right here. That's basically it. Now we go to the second story, which typically you don't find hiders here, but you should still be familiar with it. For fun, right? I like that. That was good. As for the hay bales, I like to think of the number 2. Alright, you have 2 in a row, 2 in a row, and 2 blocks on top of the stack. So if there's any deviation from that, like 5 blocks in a row is obviously fake. Or 3 blocks on top of the stack is obviously fake. Right? Pretty nice. Makes it pretty easy to sort of think about. You also have 2 hay bales in a row right here. Making it really easy. This melon structure is actually, it's going to occur in another building. This specific structure occurs in another building in Pirate Island. So I'm going to bring up when that structure occurs again. And these block piles are pretty easy. Typically you don't find hiders in them. So that's basically it for the second story. Now we go to the third story. There's a little bit more going on. Notice on this side of the building, this is just like at the downstairs, this is the only side of the wall, right? This is the only slot that doesn't have a block, right? It's the only space that doesn't, it's like sort of like a parking space, right? It's the only parking space open, right? This is the only spot that doesn't have a block. So, pretty easy, and usually it's an anvil, by the way. Pretty nice to memorize that. We also have a slot right here, which could be a hay bale or a melon, either type. this specific spot. For the TNTs at this corner right here, it's basically, if you see it squared off, right, sort of looks like a 3x3 square on the bottom. Right, the only other spot really is to see a TNT like this, right, 2 TNTs on top of each other. Over here, you typically don't find hiders, but if you do, I guess the way you could think about it is if you have basically, you know, on this side of the wall you have one open space, but over here you have 3 open spaces. Basically, that's the way I like to think about it. So slot there, and slot there. Right? Pretty nice. So that's basically it. And for the top of the building, there's basically 4 corners, right? And all of them are the same. No matter how far down you go, I believe you can always get back up. Right? You can always get back up to where you started. It used to not be that way, by the way. Where if you went down far enough, you couldn't get back up, but I believe they changed that. Another part about this building is the fact that there's a flower pot on the edge right there, which sometimes you'll find infestors in them, so you should be familiar with that as well. Alright, so next we're going to go to this building right here. Also a pretty big building with 3 stories as well. Right, but it has a little less going on compared to the building that we just went over. So we'll start with the downstairs. As for the downstairs, the most notable feature is this bookshelf. It's basically right behind the ladder, right? There's this hole that a bookshelf would hide in right behind the ladder, like this. Should definitely be familiar with that one. Right, but notice, as for what's next to the ladder, we have 2 open spaces, right? There's an open space right here, and an open space right here. You just gotta sort of memorize those 2 spots. You could also sometimes see a bookshelf at this corner right here. That'll sometimes happen. Or a bookshelf at this corner, which is a little different looking. It's not exactly at the corner of the room. You also have a cake on top of these bookshelves, right? You have a singular cake. If you ever see 2 cakes, then it's fake, then one of them's fake. But there are some other things, right? You typically don't find hiders associated with these blocks, so you don't have to worry about it. Going up here, this is the 2nd story. As you can see, there's a lot less going on, because there's not that many blocks that hiders will hide as. Sometimes you'll find infestors infesting in this cake. But as you can see, there's not much going on. I mean, you have 2 bookshelves here. Right, typically, you don't find bookshelves here, though. You literally don't. Right, typically, it doesn't happen. But you should be familiar with the fact that you have 2 bookshelves here. Sometimes you'll find random hiders, such as flower pots hiding behind this structure. You can't get inside the structure, unfortunately. That would be so cool. It's like, wow, you can't do it, but if you can, it's just for some reason cool, right? Hiders can actually hide as a piston for some reason, so it turns out you could actually sometimes find a piston hiding here. That's probably the most common thing to see in this room. That's basically it. And again, once you reach the attic, there's also, like, very little going on. I'd say there's really 3 main possibilities. As for the melons and pumpkin, it's literally this hiding spot right here. As for the bookshelf, basically if you ever see 3 bookshelves all together, usually like this, that would be fake. And the 3rd possibility, or the 3rd main possibility, is to see a TNT in this spot. That's basically it. Assuming I'm a flower pot, you also can sometimes find hiders here, or not really common, but that's basically it. Alright, going up to the roof, it's a little bit more difficult to, the roof is a little bit more annoying compared to the other roofs. It's a little more annoying, because as you can see, once you've gone this far, you can't really get back up to where you started. But we're not done yet. It turns out hiders can actually hide on top of these, or what did I call them? Ledges. We called them ledges, right? Hiders can hide on top of these ledges. I love that word, ledges. Right? The theoretical definition of a ledge, right? I like that. But flower pot, many times you're going to find flower pots on top of those ledges. It turns out many random hiders tend to know about that. So you can obviously just launch your bow, right, in order to get rid of them. That was good. Alright, that's basically it for that building. Okay, so now we get to this corner building. It's really small compared to the one we just went over. It has a downstairs and an upstairs. That's basically it. You have this cauldron. Many times you'll find flower pots hiding in this cauldron. There should only be a total of 2 flower pots in the downstairs. If you ever see 2 grouped together like that, it's fake. 2 grouped together like that, it's fake. there is an opening right here that a bookshelf could hide in, so you should be familiar with that as well. Let's get to the upstairs. Right, not much going on. Right, if you see a flower pot or a furnace on top of this furnace, then it's fake. If you ever see 2 melons in a row, right, that would be fake. If you ever see a square of TNT like this, whoops, you can't even become, it can become solid there, square of TNT. Right, this is actually a common structure that you would probably see quite often in block hunt, so you should just memorize it actually. Many times you'll find non-ideal hiders hiding in, they're not here, but you can do it on this side, I believe, yeah. In these ledges, I love that word, ledges, right? So you can sometimes see that. Sometimes you'll find hiders on the roof, but not as common. That's basically it. Next we go over to this building. As for the edge of the building, you have flower pots, and it turns out that this is the only side of the building that has exactly 1 flower pot. All the other sides have 2 flower pots, as you can see, 2, 2, and 2. But this is the only side, right? It's the front of the, the side of the building facing hider spawn. This is the only side that has 1 flower pot, so don't be fooled. If you see 2 flower pots on this side, this is actually a fake flower pot, right? But obviously, if you ever see 3 flower pots on either side, then it's gonna be, then obviously you're gonna have a fake flower pot. Like that would be fake if you ever see 3. As for the downstairs of the building, usually you don't see 4 blocks in a row, but if you do, it's fake. There should be no flower pots in the downstairs whatsoever. And if you ever see 2 cakes, for instance, a cake at this corner, it's fake. Or 2 cakes on the counter. I love that word, counter, and that would be fake, right? The theoretical definition of a counter. We'll go over that stuff in another video. But that's basically it for that. Now we get the upstairs. For the upstairs, there's a hole right here that a hider can hide in, right? They can hide in the hole. If you ever find a hay bale in this slot, it's fake. Notice next to the ladders, you don't have a single block next to this ladder. You don't have a block next to this ladder. But same goes for this ladder. You don't have a block next to them either. So if you ever see a block next to the ladders, right, directly next to the ladders, then it's fake. And as for the roof, it's a very generic roof, but really, turns out for some reason it's really common to find hiders on these edges. So you should just be familiar. Like for instance, a furnace right there, or even on the other side as well. So you should just be familiar. Hiders like to hide on these for some reason. I like that. That was good. That was good. I like saying it. Okay, I'll stop. I keep saying it. Okay. Why do I keep saying that? Alright. So now we're going to go to the next building, which is a pretty big building. There's not many block piles in it, but it's really common for hiders to hide on top of the building. So that's the first thing I'm actually going to go over is the top of the building, because it's most common to find hiders on the very top of it. Random hiders, more specifically. Like randoms. I like that word. Right, the theoretical definition of a random. Alright, I'll stop. That was bad. That was rude, right? No, I'm just kidding. But anyways, yeah, many times you'll find hiders on top of the very top of the building. Right? Yeah, most of the time launching their bow at hunters. So, usually it's pretty easy to kill the hiders that are up here. But as for, like, specific hiding spots on the roof itself, right? You can find hiders, like, in here. Right? In here. No. On this side, you can find hiders over here. Notice there actually is a real flower pot on this ledge. But, let's see. There's also this other ledge right here you could find a hider hiding on top of, right? This would specifically be a fake flower pot. The other one's a real flower pot. You also do have some infestor spots, right? There's an infestor spot right there. I missed, my arrow missed the flower pot. That was good, right? It missed it. But anyways, you also have another flower pot right there. You can sort of see it. It's purple. Okay, let's go over the hiding spots. I'm not going to worry about the flower pots and the cakes on the edge. I typically don't pay attention to those, and I'm perfectly fine not paying attention to them. But as for other spots to memorize, it's for the downstairs, for the bookshelves. It's basically if you ever see a bookshelf right here. Right. I'd say it's pretty easy to memorize the structure. There's not, there should be no flower pots in the downstairs. Like, notice there's no flower pots, but sometimes you'll find flower pots here. Notice you have pistons and furnaces. Obviously, as I said before, hiders can hide as pistons. So if you ever see it all, if you ever see this entire kitchen area connected together, right? I'm gonna call this a kitchen. Whenever you see these two things connected together, right? It's all connected together. If there's a piston or a furnace here, then that would be fake. Notice there's a total of 2 cakes. So if you ever see 3 cakes like that, then that would be fake. Hider underneath the stairs, usually a flower pot, that would be fake. Going to the upstairs, it's a little weird, right? Again, not many block piles, right? Notice you have 2 blocks, 2 blocks, 2 blocks. Makes it really easy to sort of know that. There shouldn't be any blocks over here, but sometimes you'll find hiders over here. As for over here, you can actually escape and go to the roof if you want. But as for this little area right here, it's sort of like a parkour thing. This is a real flower pot. Alright, it's a real flower pot, just so you know. But many times you'll find hiders inside these doors. You should be familiar with that. And again, we have 4 total areas to hide. Notice there's a cake up here, right? This cake is real, right? But if you see a cake on the other side, right, notice it's a lot more of a narrow pathway that I'm walking across. That's how you know this cake would be fake. Right, notice this pathway is 1 block wide, while the pathway over here is 2 blocks wide. Notice it's 2 blocks wide, right? 2 blocks wide that I'm walking across. This cake would be, right, the cake associated with the 2 blocks wide is real, while if you see a cake associated with this 1 block wide pathway, right, this would be a fake cake. Hopefully that makes sense. That's basically it for this building. Alright, now we're going to go over to the next building, which is this one. Again, this building doesn't have that many block piles in it, just like the previous building, for some weird reason. It has a downstairs, an upstairs, and an attic. As for the downstairs, again, there's not that many block piles, so there's really not that many places to hide as a block. Right, but there is this little spot right here where you could sort of be a little less visible, but it's pretty obvious when there's hiders hiding here for some reason. Now, this is what I was talking about earlier, right? Remember this melon stack from the second building we went over? Yeah. Do you remember this? Yeah, we saw this exact block pile in that one of the previous buildings. And I told you to keep this block pile in mind. It's that same exact block pile, so it makes it really easy to memorize it. The typical spot for this block pile is to find a hider right here. Right? Makes the stack symmetrical. As for the bookshelves, right, typically what you'd see is a bookshelf all the way on the top right here. We go to the upstairs. Again, there's not that many block piles. Typically what you'd see is, you know, if you ever see 5 bookshelves all together like this, that would be big. Not much over here. Notice there's a lot of ways to move about. There's really a door there. A lot of different ways to move about. I'll talk about the openings in another video, just so you know. When we get to the attic, this is pretty close to the melon stack that we just saw, actually. Turns out there's a melon hiding right here. It forms that identical structure, right? But obviously, it's not identical to it, so hopefully that gives you a good way to think about it. There's also a hiding spot up here where you can sometimes find a flower pot hiding. Right here. The roof of the building is pretty self-explanatory, so I'm not going to go over it. I'm just going to move on to the next step. Alright, so now that we've gone over this building, we've made it back to where we started, right? We've already gone over this building. And now we're back at the building we went over in the beginning of the video. And it turns out we've gone over all the buildings on the outline of the map. Turns out we have 3 more buildings to go over, which are more in the center of the map, right? This building, that building, and that building, right? These buildings are basically right next to hider spawn. But despite being so close to hider spawn, for some reason, these 3 buildings are not super common to find hiders in, right? Hiders tend to be more attracted to the outside than the inside of buildings for some reason. But, you know, nonetheless, you do find hiders inside of them. Let's start with this building. I went over this in the first video, I think, but hiders can hide on top of this ledge, right? but they can hide deeper into the building, like for instance, blocking the pathway like this. But if you ever see two flower pots right next to each other here, that's how you know this is fake. Over here, hiders can hide inside of this cauldron. If you ever see a block on either side of this furnace, it's fake. If you ever see an anvil hiding right here specifically, that would be fake. Now we go to the upstairs. As you can see, not much space to hide, and typically you don't find hiders up here. It's not really common. In my opinion, you should be familiar with this spot. Right here. Typically a chicken or a flower pot, though. If they ever hide there, that is. Many times you'll find hiders on top of buildings. That's more common than being inside of buildings. Up on top of the building. That's basically it. Next, we're going to go over to the other building. Now, as for the legends, right? This is a cauldron on top of this ledge and a cake on top of this ledge. If you ever see two cauldrons, then it's fake. If you ever see two cakes, then it's fake. You just gotta memorize that. Looking at the downstairs, right? There's a downstairs and an upstairs to this building, right? As for the downstairs, right, you have an opening right here. Let's see. If you ever see four cakes all together over here, then it's fake. If you ever see a bookshelf on top of this bookshelf, then it's fake. That's basically it. Going to the upstairs, if you ever see either a bookshelf or a TNT in this specific spot, like either right here or right here, then that would be fake. You typically don't find hiders in these spots, so that's basically it. Again, it's most common to find hiders on top of the building itself. Like for some reason, many times you'll find random blocks hiding here or right here. Literally random blocks. For some reason, it's really common to find hiders there, but I don't know why. But that's basically it. So now we're going to go over our final building, which is this building, right? If you recall, we already went over this side, right? Where it's most common to find a flower pot right here, or, on the right side. There's two total flower pots on this side. But on the other side, it turns out there's an opening right here. You should have a total of 3 flower pots, right? But as for the building itself, as for the downstairs, right as you enter, there's these bookshelves, right? If you ever see a bookshelf right here, right, this would be a fake bookshelf. I'm gonna go over here first, right? As for the first things first, this melon stack and this furnace stack have identical shapes, right? As you can see, this is actually a pretty common structure, so just be familiar with this and be familiar with this, right? They're identical. This melon stack is pretty easy. It's just sort of like, you can sort of view the pattern as if you have a 2x3 rectangle and then a 1x2 rectangle. This is a pretty easy structure. As for the cakes, it's basically 4 and 2. There's 4 cakes in a row, 2 cakes in a row. So if you ever see 4 and 3 like this, then that would be fake. Alright, pretty easy. I like saying that. Pretty easy. That was good, right? Okay. For this room, you have the bookshelves, and the bookshelves, again, they're identical to what we saw for the melons and the furnaces, right? That bookshelf stack is identical to it, right? Identical shape. Now, even more convenient, as for these TNTs and hay bales, try to view it as if the TNTs and hay bales are identical blocks. Just think of it that way. Altogether, the TNTs and the hay bales form a symmetrical stack, right? Because if you think about it, you have on the left side a 3-block staircase. On the right side, you also have a 3-block staircase. So it's symmetrical. And then in the center, you have a total of 5 blocks, which again, it's symmetrical. So as you can see, the entire stack altogether is symmetrical, which makes it really easy to memorize, differences. Like, for instance, no longer symmetrical. Again, no longer symmetrical. Now, there are cases where it can still be symmetrical. For instance, if there's, like, let's say, TNT hiding right here, overall the stack is still symmetrical. Or if there's a TNT hiding right here, the stack is still symmetrical. And so, you'll just have to memorize things like that, right? Just those two. Otherwise, if you ever see this stack no longer symmetrical, I guess, yeah, pretty easy. It's altogether, it's a symmetrical stack. It makes it really easy to memorize. the last thing we have to go over is the upstairs of the building, which is this right here. And it looks like there's a lot to memorize, but let me try to break it down for you, right? As for the cakes, there should be a total of 7 cakes. For the flower pots, it's a total of 5 flower pots. So basically, in the upstairs, in total, you have 7 cakes and 5 flower pots. Specifically, you have, wait, not 7. Sorry, for some reason I thought there was 5 cakes here. I don't know why, I instinctively thought that. Sorry, there's 6 cakes and 5 flower pots. More specifically, it's really easy because you have 2 of the cakes over here and 2 of the flower pots are over here. While you have 4 of the cakes here and 3 of the flower pots here. Just memorize the numbers. You know, you have 2 cakes, 2 flower pots, 4 cakes, 3 flower pots on either side. And the next thing is that you have this bookshelf stack, which forms that same structure that we saw in the downstairs many times. But as for this bookshelf stack, it's almost identical to the bookshelf stack over here. It's almost identical, just it has an extra block, right? Right? You can view it as if it's that same exact structure, it just has an extra block right there. Pretty easy to memorize that. And so, also, the remainders of this room is literally this furnace stack and this bookshelf stack, which happen to be identical to each other. As you can see, this furnace stack and this bookshelf stack are identical to each other. If you think about it, it's actually, if you look at it from this point of view, just focusing on these blocks, it's formed that same exact structure that we saw many times in the museum. And so it makes it really nice to memorize that. Right, the only addition is that there's another block. So as you see, the furnace stack is identical to the bookshelf stack, making it really easy to sort of memorize it. So hopefully this breaks it down a little better for you. Right, but typically I would just, this is definitely something you would memorize for the purposes of Radar Hunter. Otherwise it's not really that big of a deal. And as for the upstairs, many times you'll find hiders up here, so you just sort of check up here and notice there's an opening right here. That's basically it for this video. So I believe we've gone over basically everything I wanted to go over for buildings. Right? We've gone over basically everything that I could think of. And so that is basically it for this video.